So welcome everyone to Tea and Talk at the Sid Richardson Museum virtual edition. My name is Leslie Thompson. I am Director of Adult Programs at the Sid. And before we get going, I want to actually start us off with how I begin all of our adult programs, which is with a land acknowledgement. And for viewers who are not familiar, a land acknowledgement pays tribute to the original inhabitants of the land that we are on. And while we are all in different locations and not actually at the physical museum, I'll just speak to the general area that the museum is located. So we, the Sid Richardson Museum, respectfully acknowledge all Native American peoples who've lived on this land since time immemorial. And the Sid would especially like to acknowledge and pay respect to the Wichita and affiliated tribes upon whose historical homeland our museum is located. So today, in addition to members of the Sid Richardson Museum staff, we also have a special guest with us today. So I will quickly introduce everyone so our viewers become familiar with who's talking today. And I'll start in order, I'll go in order of my screen. So at top, we have our special guest, Connie Barganier from the Kimbell Art Museum. She is the education manager there. Then below me, we have Scott Winterroad, who is our director at the Sid Richardson Museum. Then we have Betsy Thomas, who is Director of Education Resources at the Sid Richardson Museum. Then we've got Shelby Orr, who is Director of School and Family Programs at the Sid. And then we've got Renee Green, who is our Admin Assistant at the Sid Richardson Museum. So to quickly review for those who are not familiar with our Tea and Talk program, this is a program that we host at the museum the first Wednesday of every month throughout the school year. And it's really, you can think of Tea and Talk as an opportunity to slow down the art viewing process. You know, the average visitor spends about 10-15 seconds with a work of art. And that's really not a lot of time to really absorb a painting and really get in all the details. So Tea and Talk is really kind of a chance to just slow down, maybe take a breath, and really look at one work of art. Now, normally we spend about 30 minutes, about half an hour with a painting during our Tea and Talk program, but for the sake of our virtual experience, we will just be focusing on this painting for 10 minutes. And I have on the screen with us a digital reproduction of a painting that is from our collection at the Sid. And I want to remind our viewers that while we are very fortunate to have a nice digital reproduction, it is by no means a replacement for the original. Really, when you can, looking at the original work of art is the best because there's so many details, colors, even the texture of the canvas that you miss in a digital reproduction. So I really encourage you, when you have the chance, to actually go look at the real painting. But for today, since we don't have an option, we've got this nice digital reproduction with us. And yeah, with that being said, let's take a look at this painting together. I'm going to refrain from mentioning the artist or the title or date until the end of our conversation, just to avoid influencing our looking here, because this is really just about what we see right here in front of us. So let's look at this painting together. Let's have a conversation. So as you're looking at this painting, just share something that you notice.
I'll start, if I may. The thing that first impressed me looking at this painting is just how dramatic the contrasts of light and dark are, especially that that giant triangle on the left side of the composition, and again, that's stark contrast with the foreground and especially sort of the immediate foreground.
Yeah. So you're noticing this really, really stark contrast between light and dark, and you're pointing out that that triangle on the left side that is kind of a very, very dark shadow in contrast to the very bright landscape of the rest of the composition. Yeah. What else do you notice?
It's interesting because whenever I was looking at it, I was seeing that really strong X that's implied by that triangle on the left, and then the way that the line of the hill goes all the way across from lower left to upper right, and then even the implied line of the trail the horses are following in the foreground. So there's this really kind of strong axis of well, centrality to the figures, of course, because they're right in the dead center of the composition, and it's bullseye.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah. So Scott's pointing out there's kind of this X, as she'll be using her mouse to show. There's this visual line from both sides of that shadow triangle that goes across the canvas that then places these central figures right in the middle of the X. So you're really in the central focal point of the painting.
And the main composition, I mean, you're talking about how angular it is, and even the figures, I see the horses seem really angular as well, and the figures too. I mean, like from this man's beard, and just the horses don't look really well fed at this point. So everything seems really, I don't know, the angular is the word that keeps coming to mind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Shelby's picking up on kind of this theme of angularity in the other details of the painting, like the horse and the details on the male figures. Yeah.
I just noticed something that I never saw before in looking at this painting. We talked about the shadow on the left, and I was really looking at that for the first time. I see the horse, the head of colored horse with maybe a pack on. I've never noticed that horse before.
Okay.
Renee?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I've never noticed it. Just amazing, which is exactly
Yeah. So Renee is just discovering as we speak of this the head of a horse. It looks like it's a white horse. At least the head is a white horse that has maybe a pack on the back. It's kind of peeking from behind the other two horses that you can barely make out in the shadow, the triangle shadow that we've been talking about.
It seems like the contrast of that horse against that shadow really does a great job of reinforcing those intersecting diagonals that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I also love how the glances or the direction of the gaze of the two riders at the front of the, I don't know, who knows how many people are actually in the train, or actually it looks like there may be one other person. Anyway, I love that their gazes are divergent like the diagonals.
Yeah. So Connie's noticing just the direction in which both of the central figures are looking are in complete opposite directions, which continues that theme of diagonals.
With incredible intensity, I might add.
Right, yeah, they're very focused. What else do you notice?
I'm struck by the way that the horses are kind of dappled in the way that they're painted, but they also seem to dissolve, and that the beauty of that white horse that we were just talking about and the way it dissolves into that kind of bluish background, its shadow merges with the background, and there's this almost ghost-like presence. But there's this kind of beautiful dappled quality even to the middle horse and the way it's dissolving into the shadows. So there's something about the way these figures merge into the landscape that it's really appealing.
Yeah. So Scott's pointing out the way in which the horses are painted and the how it kind of leads them to dissolve into the background as well. One of the details that I noticed with this painting that's kind of hard to see with the digital reproduction, but the use of blue in the figures, in the horses in particular, the outlines, which I think in some ways maybe helps lend to that disappearing, that fading quality into the background, because there's so much blue in the rest of the composition. But I've always been really I don't know, mesmerized by Remington's use of blue, especially in his later works like this one, where I don't know, there's something about that blue that just really draws me in.
It creates really beautiful effects, and I like the interplay of the warm and the cool. And actually, one thing that we haven't quite talked about, I mean, we have in the dramatic contrast of light and dark, but just how oppressive that light is. I mean, it creates beautiful effects over the fur of the animals, and it brings out different details and kind of in a very sort of stark way. But this looks like 110-degree Texas summer. There's blue and they're warm colors, but there's zero green.
Right. Yeah.
It makes me wonder, because they're dressed pretty warmly. It looks like, but that sun, is definitely kind of blinding. And I'm wondering if they're kind of blinking, looking around, trying to figure out where they are. It's very dramatic.
Yeah. Very intense.
Yeah, very extreme weather, extreme temperatures, extreme dryness.
Extreme color.
Extreme colors, yeah.
Yeah. What else do you notice?
One of the things that I really like about this work of art is how much personality the horses themselves have. So, for example, I mean, you have the first horse that has his ears back. I grew up riding horses, so I'm always paying attention to their behavior, and his ears are back, kind of like he's not happy about the situation, maybe a little apprehensive. And I also noticed that we see all these, lines for the horse's legs. His hind leg is lifted up kind of apprehensively, as if he's not quite sure where to put his foot down, not quite sure if he wants to move forward. And then we have the foreshortened head of the horse at dead center looking out at us. And then the poor pack horse behind him, who's kind of downtrodden because he has the heavy load of whatever he's carrying.
Yeah, I love when we have horse people in our talks. We have so many paintings of horses, and not being familiar with horses, like how to read horses really brings so much more to the story. So you pointing out those details about the ears and what the ears can communicate, the positioning of the feet. That is so interesting.
I love that.
Yeah.
I like that they're the only figures looking at the audience, looking at the viewer.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah. The horse is the only one acknowledging us.
Yeah, and I can't decide if it's a friendly face or not. The first one definitely looks cranky to me. Even the way that the eye and the way that like the mouth is shaped. I mean, it looks like he's been through a lot, not unlike the writers themselves.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I mean, I'm struck as I look at that about just the detailing in those two figures and then the third horse. And then everything else is just very obscured. It's simplified and it's almost out of focus. So it's really interesting, that push and pull of attention to those horses, attention to the figures, attention to what you see in that middle section of the painting. But everything else is really simplified, very abstract.
Yeah.
I was kind of interested also in how the details, the quote unquote details, or the just sort of the craggy rocks in the background, sort of, where the artist has picked out just little areas where it's shadowed and it creates kind of this interesting pattern look, how that interplays with the way that light is playing off of, like the pommel of the saddle with the first rider, even the face of the first rider in particular. There's like kind of a rocky hardness to it that makes me connect, I think, to the landscape.
That's interesting. Yeah. Noticing those parallels.
Can the second rider find it interesting that if you're looking head on, shadow, and the left
Renee, I think we're losing you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't able to hear what you're kind of going in and out.
Oh, I'll text my question to Scott.
Okay. Well, actually, we've reached our 10 minutes.
Oh.
So we can continue the, well, I'll add your question to the post, to the comments.
Okay.
So we can keep it going.
Okay.
Because obviously there's so much more to talk about with this painting. I mean, there's so many details that we have not even pointed out or discussed. So this is really just a little introduction into the painting, into talking about this painting. And for viewers who are looking at this painting, I guess we've already sort of touched on who the artist is. I mean, you see the signature down there, but this is a painting by Frederic Remington. It's called The Unknown Explorers from 1908. And so it is kind of classified as one of his later paintings. Remington passed in 1909. So this is in the last years of his life. And this is kind of from the period where he really starts playing with color, with light, and really producing those more dramatic sunset or sunstruck paintings and his nocturne paintings as well. And then of course, they also lose himself his brushwork, which we see a lot in here, but really didn't get to talk too much about. Of course, like I mentioned, we'd love to continue the conversation with our viewers. So if you have any thoughts about this painting, any observations that you're seeing while you're looking at this, please leave your comments below. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to keep this going. When the museum opens back up, we would love to have you in and have an opportunity to see this painting in person. But in the meantime, I hope you'll enjoy this video, and as well as exploring the rest of our collection at our website. So with that, thank you so much for everyone for joining for Tea and Talk today. This was fun.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.